With the majority of results now in the New York Democratic Mayoral Primary, Zohran Mamdani beat Andrew Cuomo 43.5% to 36.4%, and said the political approach that propelled his campaign could resonate across the United States. Mamdani, who, despite receiving abuse from conservative political circles on social media such as Hamas terrorist sympathizer or jihadist terrorist, or calls for his deportation, easily defeated the former governor Andrew Cuomo in Tuesday's primary. A major setback for Cuomo, who had run a centrist campaign with strong establishment backing. Mamdani said in his first major interview that his message centered on economic justice and bold policies like rent reform, affordable food, and free public transit, which taps into nationwide frustrations with inequality. This campaign is really about economic disparity, Mamdani said, and you don't need to live in New York City to feel its effect. It's a national issue. Americans everywhere are looking for leaders who won't just empathize with their struggles, but will take real action. He added that returning to the party's roots, fighting for working-class communities, is what energizes Democrats across the country.
We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford. A city where they can do more than just struggle. One where those who toil in the night can enjoy the fruits of their labor in the day. Where hard work is repaid with a stable life. Where 8 hours on the factory floor or behind the wheel of a cab is enough to pay the mortgage. Where rent-stabilized apartments are actually stabilized. And where public safety keeps us truly safe. And it's where the mayor will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism. To stop masked ICE agents from deporting our neighbors, and to govern our city as a model for the Democratic Party. A party where we fight for working people with no apology.
Zohran Mamdani's rise reflects a dramatic unraveling of the Democratic Party establishment, an institution that once stood as a bulwark amongst Trump's first term, but has since lost its footing through compromise and caution. In the early days of Trump's second term, the party's leadership appeared adrift, opting for political triangulation rather than meaningful opposition. The party's favorability has since nosedived, not because Republicans have gained ground, but because Democrats have alienated their own base. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's recent decision to yield to Trump on a deeply unpopular Republican spending bill was for many a breaking point. It marked the moment when the so-called resistance fully detached from the Democratic establishment. Discontent is not confined to one demographic or region. It cuts across urban centers, suburbs, and rural communities. Across the board, Americans feel the system is failing, prices continue to climb, real wages have shrunk, and a pervasive sense of chaos looms. These frustrations are particularly acute in New York City, where Mayor Eric Adams, who is seeking to avoid prosecution on corruption charges through an agreement to carry out Donald Trump-aligned policies, despite the city's overwhelming rejection of Trumpism at the ballot box. With endorsements from progressive figures such as Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Mamdani's grassroots campaign relied heavily on door-to-door organizing and a savvy social media presence. This stood in stark contrast to Cuomo's top-down campaign, backed by wealthy donors, prominent political figures like Bill Clinton and Representative Jim Clyburn, and marked by scripted appearances. Cuomo also faced ongoing fallout from sexual misconduct allegations and criticism that his mayoral bid was driven more by political ambition than genuine concern for New York City. Mamdani, in contrast, emphasized the importance of people-powered movements, saying the way to counter the influence of big money in politics is through mobilizing people. Our campaign was built on a scale of community organizing rarely seen in this city, he said, Our political message doesn't need translation. It speaks directly to the everyday experiences of working people. And what's more direct than one New Yorker knocking on another New Yorker's door? At a time when political violence is on the rise, Mamdani has reported multiple death threats, including voicemails threatening to blow up his car in the final stretch of his campaign. The NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force is investigating the incidents, one of which referred to the explosive pages used in Israel's recent attack on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Even Trump himself weighed in yesterday, calling Mamdani a 100% communist lunatic, while criticizing his appearance and his voice. Senior Trump regime figures have joined in, including White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, the architect of mass deportations, claiming New York City is the clearest warning yet of what happens to a society when it fails to control migration. Donald Trump Jr. amplified a post reading, "I'm old enough to remember when New Yorkers endured 9/11 instead of voting for it," adding New York City has fallen. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted an AI-generated image of the Statue of Liberty draped in a burqa, while conservative commentator Matt Walsh lamented on how the famously immigrant New York isn't an American city anymore, because of its population being 40% foreign-born. The attacks represent a pattern of Islamophobic targeting throughout the primary campaign. Interviewers repeatedly pressed Mamdani on Israel-Palestine issues while giving other candidates more latitude. With his victory, Mamdani becomes the Democratic nominee in a city where Democrats typically dominate general elections. However, the race could become more complicated. Cuomo is reportedly considering running as an independent, and current Mayor Eric Adams, whose support within the party has collapsed amid corruption allegations and his warming ties to Trump, has also announced his run as an independent. They would join Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa, a right-wing commentator and founder of the Guardian Angels, making for a potentially contentious four-way race in November. Still, Mamdani remains the frontrunner. If elected, he would become New York City's first Muslim mayor, and at 33, a rising force in the future of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders wrote today, "The Democratic Party is at a crossroads. It can continue to push policies that maintain a broken and rigged economic and political system and ignore the pain of the 60% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck. It can turn its back on the dreams of a younger generation, which, if we don't change that system, will likely be worse off than their parents. It can continue to depend on billionaire donors and out-of-touch campaign consultants. It can ignore the tragic reality that tens of millions of Americans are giving up on democracy because they don't see their government understanding their struggles and the realities of their lives or doing anything about it. Or it can learn the lesson that the Zohran Mamdani campaign taught us on Tuesday, and that is to have the courage to address the real economic and moral issues that face the majority of our people, take on the greed and power of the oligarchy, and fight for an agenda that can improve life for working families. The American people are beginning to stand up and fight back. We've seen that in the millions of people who came out for the No Kings rallies that took place this month in almost every state. And on Tuesday we saw that in the Democratic primary in New York City. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.